Start recording. So good morning, everybody, to our February coffee morning 2026. It seems to have been a busy calendar in terms of we had Valentine's Day, we had start of Lent and our pancakes yesterday, we've had Chinese New Year, we've had the Ramadan start. So lots going on in our calendars outside of work. But today, our theme of the coffee morning is clarity in uncertainty. So, as a profession, I think we all know that we're navigating a huge amount of regulatory change. We have AI, which is disrupting how we've always done work, and we have evolving client expectations. So, today we've got two complementary lenses. We've got Jane Gunn here, who'll be talking about critical thinking and decision making in uncertainty. And we also have Jeremy Green, who will be giving us some practical tips around readiness for the MTD and that compliance transformation. And I think both of those topics mirror the reality of what's going on in the industry. So we have the text compliance and we still need human judgments as part of that mix. So first of all, we will have Jeremy Green talking. So Jeremy is from Coconut and he's one of the member benefits, or Coconut's a member benefit with the IAB. And you might have known Jeremy from GoSimpleTax days too. So Jeremy, we're talking about making tax digital for income tax. I know it's a topic that we've covered off many times, but I just think it's worth keeping this on the agenda for now. And he'll give you a quick update to any legislation and your requirements as an accountant and a quick overview really of how Coconut can support you and provide that solution. So, Jeremy, over to you.
Helps if I unmute myself, so note for the future. You should be able to see my screen now. Sarah's oversold me. Today, what we're going to have is a very short session. Basically, it's an advert for a webinar in a week's time where we're going to go through MTD submissions and various other technical details Sarah referred to. Okay, so today in this short session, we're going to look at what's changing, why it matters to you, and how to get ready. And also to help you get access to how you can see a submission working in a practical setting. So today is just a very brief overview, and the webinar next week is the deeper dive. I'm Jeremy. I've been with GoSimpleTax and Coconut from the very beginning, more than 10 years. I'm also a member of the IAB, so I understand practice pressures, deadlines, client chasing, and last-minute panics that we all have to deal with. My role at Coconut involves support and development and making sure Coconut delivers what users actually need for MTD. With the ethos of trying to keep it as simple as possible and given the environment we operate in. So what's really changing? For your affected clients, the single annual self-assessment is going to become quarterly digital updates plus an end-of-year finalization. It's not just a filing change, it's really a behavioral change. And your clients that are used to seeing you once a year and now need to think about getting involved quarterly and staying on top of record keeping. Getting the clients to focus on digital records is going to be the real focus for you, I think. We're only a few months away. Clients with a total sole trader and property revenue over 50k will be mandated from the 5th of April this year, 6th of April this year. And we all know how quickly that's going to turn up. So practices that are ahead of the game, preparing clients earlier, are going to have a far calmer transition than those leaving it till Q1 of the new tax year. There's one key thing you should take away from today, and that is to get an agent services account if you've not already got one. Without an agent services account, you can't operate under MTD. I'll copy and paste, if you bear with me a second. I'll try and copy and paste into the chats. I'll do it later after I've stopped presenting because I can't cope with
that's
Zoom.
a good idea.
Okay. What the agent services account's going to do, it's going to allow you, excuse me, to provide service under MTD, and it will pull across your self-assessment clients into the agent services account as a start of that process. The webinar will go into further detail on that. So, referring to that webinar, we've partnered with IAB to provide you a member-specific presentation. We're going to walk through exactly how Coconut and MTD work in practice in that session, and you'll see a quarterly submission being made. And you'll be able to ask technical questions that you haven't been able to deal with today. So the webinar is going to help you move from being aware of MTD to being able to implement the processes necessary to deal with it. And we're going to cover how MTD is going to change your workflow and how to complete quarterly submissions. And the focus is going to be on practicality rather than theory. So in order to book on that webinar, please scan the QR code on screen. That will take you to a booking form, or there's a web link there that I will also put into the chat if you have technical difficulties with the QR code or copying that web link down. Now, if you've got any questions that are burning at this point, I'll be happy to try and respond to them. Otherwise, thank you for your attention, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, Jeremy. So if everyone can put that in the diary, that would be good. Mariska, if you can cut and paste that link into the chat, that would be useful for today. Jeremy, just going back to your note there about the agent services, are you able to do any kind of demonstration now about how to set that up?
Not at this point in time. It's not planned for in this session. There'll be something more meaningful at the webinar. I do apologise.
Okay, but that will be covered in the webinar.
Yes, as far as I'm aware, one of the firm directors is doing that webinar, and I will stress that.
Okay. And just as a question, just a general question, what are you observing as being the single biggest misunderstanding still held by practices at the moment?
I've got a more of a client perspective, and there's still a lack of understanding about what is qualifying income. I'm still getting the questions about whether pensions are included. I've got foreign landlords asking if they're going to be mandated from this April. They've got another year's breathing room, foreign landlords. The qualifying income is total revenue before expenses for sole trade and property, UK property, and the revenue are going to use what they're calling a 2-year rule. So for mandation in 26, 27, they're looking at 24, 25 revenues. So they'll be looking at the revenues on the return just filed. And those people with revenues over 50k should have had letters from HMRC provoking a response. And we are seeing an uptick in user enquiries and users focusing on MTD. So it's definitely getting through, and HMRC's letters and recent marketing campaigns help.
Okay, and I do agree that I think an awful lot of this communication is still falling on our shoulders to bring our clients along with what's necessary. Would anyone agree with those comments? Put it, if you want to add that to the chat. And there is one question here from Devon about the agent services. We assume this will be similar to the MTD process. Jeremy, are you able to confirm?
I set up my own agent services account somewhat 6 months ago. It's a new account, and I have to say that I did find it terribly confusing personally. Now, maybe that's misleading because I have only got a couple of clients because for most of my life I'm employed. Once you get it straight that you've got the legacy online services account, and that is separate, that's the green and black account, that's separate from the new agent services account where your MTD clients will end up. Once you've got that clear and two separate bookmarks and two separate browsers, it becomes a lot easier to deal with. And the 64.8 should come through from the traditional online services account into the agent services account when it's set up.
Okay, that's great. So if you could give me and the IAB members one top tip today to get ready for MTD implementation, something that we've not covered, what would that be?
It would be to make sure that the clients are keeping digital records now so that when April comes along, it's not a mad scramble. What do I do? How do I do it? So make your choices about software if you've not already done so and get the appropriate clients on it. So the record keeping aspects of it become routine and easy. The actual submission's no big deal. The software gets connected to HMRC. The obligations are pulled down a lot like VAT, and the button's pressed. The numbers are presented. The user confirms they're happy with them, and the button's pressed and they get submitted. So the hard work is the awareness and the routine of record keeping. Get that in place, and the rest is not as big a deal as you imagine. There is a one comforting factor is that there's a soft landing in terms of penalties, so they're not going to be immediately impinging. Don't let that distract you from getting on with it, but it just means if there are issues, your client shouldn't be penalised in the short term.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. So Cheryl's asking, is it the same ASA account that we use for VAT, or is it another account? It is the same one, actually.
Thank you for answering that.
Yeah. And Wendy, it is still rather clumsy with the different Asian codes, etc., for each service.
I'm not the best person to ask because my agent activities are somewhat limited, and I'm as confused as your most confused member on that.
But I am hoping there'll be some clarity in next week's
I'm
webinar.
going to make sure that I feedback that stress after this session to the responsible people. Yes.
Okay, thank you ever so much. Right. So again, so just for just recapping on this. So we've got a joint webinar next Thursday on 26th at 11. So we'll be able to cover off any of those last minute questions.
Apologies, Sarah. I cannot copy the link into the.
I'll put them in the chat.
Amazing. Thank you. Thanks.
I'm going to stop my share now and put those couple links in the chat for you.
Thank you.
So just before we start with Jane, so thank you for that, Jeremy. I just had some interesting stats actually, which I thought I'd share around our industry. So currently, Jane, do you just wait just for a second? Unemployment in the UK, as we probably all heard in the news this morning, is now over 5%. Now, I think an awful lot of that is to do with businesses being taxed and making it difficult for businesses to employ. But in stark contrast to those stats, the bookkeeping industry is growing. And I think, and from my experience, I've always noted that in tough times, this industry does respond well, is very robust and does tend to grow. And that is showing up in all the stats. And I think possibly while MTD and some of these additional regulatory challenges that we're facing, while they are initially hard to adopt, they are actually driving growth in our sector. So I do expect there to be further growth even this year as this becomes mandated and awareness in the general public. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that interesting point with you while we're here. And anyway, Jane, over to yourself. Sorry, I've got bits of paper everywhere here. So
okay, I'll start sharing my slides because I've got to set them up.
Start sharing your slides, Jane, and I'll just introduce you while you're doing that.
That's it. That should work. Does that work? Can you see the slides?
Yes. So Jane,
yes.
Let me introduce you before you start.
Thank you.
So Jane Gunn is a globally respected authority on conflict resolution, critical thinking, and decision-making in times of uncertainty. So a trained mediator and facilitator, she is widely known as the Barefoot Mediator. Her leadership credentials include being listed as a global leader in Who's Who's mediation, induction into the Legal 500 Hall of Fame, serving as president of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators and holding board roles on the Civil Mediation Council of England and Wales. Jane is also the author of 3 popular books, including The Mole of the Mountain, and has been addressing audiences in the United Nations, the White House, and European Commission. She also holds Professional Speaking Award of Excellence. So in today's leaders are required to make high stakes decisions in an environment shaped by disruption, uncertainty, and constant change, which I'd agree. Clear thinking is increasingly difficult when compounded by professional disagreements, personal pressures, and internal conflicts. So Jane is here just to give us some of those soft skills support and how we manage and grow our businesses in these challenging times. So over to you, Jane.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. So, hello, great to see everybody. And I'm so impressed you've got so many people online. It's amazing. I don't usually
it's always a good turnout.
attend such big webinars. So I'm really impressed with your turnout and commitment. I want to give you quite a fun session. As Sarah said, I'm a mediator and I'm a lawyer. So there will be some reference to my work here. So my work as a mediator, just for anybody who's not clear, is I act as a neutral third party, helping people to resolve conflicts in their businesses, or more generally sort of commercial conflicts, and helping them therefore to think critically about where are they at, what's the reality of their situation. And therefore some of the examples I give you will be from that sort of mediation perspective. But today I'd like you to think, as we go through the material, what are some challenges in your life for you personally? What are some challenges in your life for you in business? And what do we face more generally in society? And I think thinking about things like AI and regulation, they seem to be taking us down a transactional regulatory route. And very much, as Sarah said, how do we come back to, which we can't let go of, this idea that we have to make a human judgment. We can't get carried along by the flow. And we'll come back to that, that idea of going against the flow somewhat when we get to the end. So I'm going to take you on a journey very quickly this morning, and anybody's welcome to follow up with me after that if that would help. To think about how mediation helps people to understand all perspectives, to independently analyze information, to dig deep into alternative viewpoints and seek greater wisdom. And of course, some of this may be concepts and ideas you could pass on to your clients as well. Let's move the slide. There we go. So when we think about critical thinking, I think it's interesting to understand how confident are we in our own thinking. Most of us think we are confident in our own thinking, but this quote here, survey by the Reboot Foundation, it found that people believed critical thinking was very important or extremely important, yet found it was lacking in, we often find it's lacking in others, but we don't think it's lacking in ourselves. But if I think of a conflict that I was mediating recently, which would be a commercial dispute between two, and it usually is between two very intelligent and successful people, same emails, same facts, when I'm listening to them, you could swear that they had completely different, it's completely different realities. So one might say, well, they deliberately misled us, and the other might say, we were completely transparent. And both of these parties, and this happens in every mediation, they're certain of their own facts and their own beliefs. They're often offended by the fact that the others don't believe them. And they're both wrong about one thing, which is they believe certainty is the same as accuracy, and it's not. We can be very certain about something, but perhaps we don't have all the facts at our fingertips. And so this is the sort of point of critical thinking, and how do we break down our thinking and understand where that's coming from. So today isn't about teaching you to think harder, it's about thinking, and I say more wisely. And I'm going to use a map and a compass, a very simple tool that I hope you'll find interesting and fun. Just coming back to remembering that most of us overestimate our own reasoning skills, and how can we correct that? So just a recent podcast I did, and I'll include the link or send the link to Sarah or Brady so that you have it. But I run a podcast series called the Barefoot Mediator. One of my recent podcasts was with a colleague of mine called Peter Milligan, and Peter's an organizational psychologist. And one of the examples he gives there is, do you believe, or did you believe in the tooth fairy? Well, I've got 4 grandchildren. They definitely believe in the tooth fairy. Well, why do they believe in the tooth fairy? Well, because a trusted figure of authority has told them that it's true, that the tooth fairy is true. They have social proof. All their other friends believe in the tooth fairy. So they're part of a group, part of it that really believes in the tooth fairy. And they have actual proof. When they lose a tooth, put it under their pillow. When they wake up in the morning, there is a pound coin. I think we used to get 5p or 6pence or something. But anyway, the value of teeth has gone up in these days. But is the tooth fairy true? Well, it depends what you believe. But most of us, as we grow up, come to believe that the tooth fairy isn't actually true. And so it's interesting, isn't it? How many things where do we rely on other people's, authority and the groupthink and the fact that we have some level of proof or evidence, when in fact that isn't true. So that just teaches us that we need to think more deeply beneath the surface. And again, an actual example is that sometimes we misunderstand people's communication. We might receive a text message from someone where we interpret their behavior as being a bit sharp or hostile, but when in fact they were in the car and they were driving and they shouldn't have been sending texts. And so we've misunderstood the communication. So critical thinking asks, what else could be true? What information am I missing? And am I reacting to facts or a story that I've created or that someone else has created and told me? And the gap between certainty and curiosity and perception and reality. And this is where disputes arise from as well. So in my job, mediation is a process of critical thinking and decision making, of testing that reality and the perception. So that's the journey I'm just going to take you on just now. So critical thinking, there's no separate definition. It relies to this ability to independently analyze information, seek out alternative wisdom, dig deep. I talk about thinking deeply, differently, and dangerously, and then to understand all perspectives. How do we create that bigger picture, which is why we're going to look at a map. So these are some of the cartoons from my books, by the way, that I'm going to be sharing. These are from I think it's from my first book, which is called How to Beat Bedlam in the Boardroom and Boredom in the Bedroom, something you might find interesting. It's a general book about the process of mediation. What is it that stops us thinking critically? Well, basically, it's fear. And one of the fears we have most is of social exclusion, or what we call social punishment. Are people going to be talking about us behind our back, thinking that we are not doing the right thing, that we're not following instructions, and so on? And other things that stop us thinking critically are someone else controlling our thinking or attempting to, maybe it being manipulated, external influence, which can come from media, social media, our own emotions and our own bias. So social pressures can be such as conformity. Do we feel that we ought to be conforming with everybody else? I've written a blog about that today on LinkedIn that you might find helpful. And examples are speaking up in a meeting. I think it was yesterday's blog, or maybe the day before, Monday's blog, where somebody said how they were from an NHS group, and they said how difficult it is to speak up in meetings and how challenging it is. It was called hanging out to dry. And they felt hung out to dry in meetings. In other words, if they spoke up, then they were suddenly excluded by the crowd. And that's a very common thing in some organizations. So speaking up in meetings where maybe you see a flaw in a plan, what happens if you don't say anything? Are you being made to look foolish? Are you being excluded? And so on. And those are blocks to critical thinking. And they block not only our individual critical thinking, but our ability to think critically as a group, as a partnership, as an organization. So it's interesting to think, are there times when, even as an organization, we are being held back from thinking critically about the current reality because we're afraid to speak up, or individuals don't feel they have permission to speak up in meetings? So I talk then about herd mentality. This is the temptation to go with the herd. And here is a meeting where everybody is smiling, but behind their masks, they're actually not very happy with the status quo. And so herd mentality is where we all agree, don't we? And herd mentality is thinking about who's not being heard. What further information is there that people have got if they were allowed to speak up? Whose voice haven't we heard yet? And so I would suggest that, sometimes we need to pause and to invite others to speak and actually to listen. And I regard that as a leadership superpower. Quick introduction there to a little character called Maurice the Mole. You can see him there. And I'm going to introduce you to Maurice the Mole in a minute, but here he is. He's the character in my latest book, The Mole and the Mountain. And you will understand why Maurice is part of this presentation. So I talk about then the island theory. The world as you see it is simply the world as you see it. So each of us see the world according to our own experience. We know this really in theory, but in everyday life, we treat others as if they lived on the same island as we do. And so we may be in the same meeting, many of you are in this meeting now, but our experience of this meeting is going to be completely different. What we remember from it, what we take away from it, And all of that depends on our past experiences, what else is going on in our mind at the time, whether we've got something else that's distracting us from the meeting, what our needs are, and so many things that influence how we experience situations, other people, conversations. So the world as you, simply the world as you see it. So we don't ask who is right, but we ask, how do we build a bridge between these islands, the islands that we all exist on? And how do I understand your world, and how do you understand my world? And how do we understand the world in general as it's changing so rapidly? Because there are so many different reasons why we all see and experience it differently. And so therefore, the premise of mediation that I practice isn't about who's right and who's wrong, but it's about what does the bigger picture look like, and what is the reality, and how can we dig more deeply to understand that reality so that we all have a clearer picture, that coming back to clarity again. I also talk then about zigzag theory, and I'm sure some of you on this call will be skiers or sailors, but when you are skiing or sailing, you don't go in a straight line, do you? You know, well, sometimes you do. I mean, you know, champion skiers, such as downhill skiers in the Olympics would be going quite fast downhill, but as we know, there have been a few crashes in the last week, and that's because you can't control your speed. And so the zigzag theory is that sometimes it makes sense to go in a zigzag rather than a straight line. In other words, it's the difference between what I call lateral thinking, thinking more broadly, and linear thinking. So if I give you an example, the difference between a motorboat and a sailing boat is that a motorboat will go directly from A to B, and it will cut through all the winds and the waves and everything, and it will go as fast as possible to B. But what if when the motorboat gets to B, that wasn't the right destination? In a sailing boat, you have much more opportunity to adjust to the wind, to the weather, to the sails. And maybe on your journey, you think, actually, Port B is not where I need to go. I need to direct to Port C. So it gives you more space to think, more time to adjust. So the principle here is that sometimes we think too fast, that we think that we know what the destination is, instead of taking time to zigzag. And so this is it's what we call adaptive intelligence. Adaptive intelligence gives us more time to think, more space to think. So those of you that are skiers and sailors, remember that zigzag analogy. Then I talk about something called the injection theory of communication. We all do this, and it's the idea that I'm right and you're wrong, and the belief in the power of persuasion, influence, or manipulation. So if I believe that I'm right and you're wrong, I will take my hypodermic syringe and I will fill it with as much information, facts, data, knowledge as I possibly can, and then I will present it to you, and I will attempt to inject all that information and data directly into your head and say, see, I'm absolutely right, aren't I? Does that work? Does the injection theory of communication work? It doesn't. When you try to persuade someone only with facts, data, and indeed, this may be helpful to many of you. We were talking about Jeremy and these new system that's coming in, trying to persuade your clients to do this. It's not necessarily only about what's helpful and right and why it's a good thing, but how are they feeling about it? So that the injection theory of communication is very functional. It relies on facts, data, evidence, why something's good, why someone's right. Whereas if you take a step back, it's about moving away from that feeling of being attacked and thinking about what is it that people are thinking and feeling, and how can I address something in that way as well. So when people are convinced they're right, then everything feels like an attack. Every compromise feels like giving in. And instead, we want information to flow and options to emerge. So, you know, again, thinking about trying to persuade your clients, it's what are the options for them? What are the options for you? How can you help make that transition perhaps to a new way of doing things, which feels a bit overwhelming at this particular stage? And then we talk about in dispute resolution where we don't succeed. We talk about something called weapons of mass destruction. I talk about how conflict escalates very quickly, and when we get to the end of that escalation, we end up in what I call the conflict abyss. That could be another topic for he's talking about what I call red button resolution, but that's talking about how conflict escalates. But just to give you a quick example of that from my perspective in mediation, it's when you're trying desperately to prove that you're right, instead of taking a step back from the edge of the abyss. And actually, how much time does that take? So when we're in an argument, whether that's in our private lives or in our business lives, or whether we're trying to sort of prove
I'll
a
call you
point.
back. I'm trying to turn the audio off from there.
Sorry?
Oh, no.
Hello?
Jane, carry on. Jeremy unmuted himself. So
Okay, I'll carry on.
no, please do. I'm loving your analogies. They're brilliant.
Oh, good. Thank you. So then we have to think about, how much is this costing me to prove that I'm right? How much of my time is this taking? How much of my business time is this taking? What is the emotional toll? And what's the probability of success? So a dispute resolves not because somebody loses and because somebody wins, but because we open out the picture. And where you don't want to go is both parties into the abyss trying to prove that you're right. So that's WMD. We're going to come back to another WMD in a minute. So I'd like you to remember that. So one of the things I like to remember is WMD, and we're going to think about the alternative WMD in a moment. I won't spoil the surprise. So in my book, let me just show you, and you probably see that I'm in a little thing, but this is the book, The Mole and the Mountain. And The Mole and the Mountain is a parable. It's written as a parable, and it's a parable about the journey we all go on when we go through conflict, change, crisis. It's written about Maurice the Mole and his journey through a landscape after a great storm. In the book, and the tools that come out of the book are a map and a compass. There's the map that's in the book. I'm going to show that to you in a large scale in a minute. You can use this process for any dialogue, any debate, any disagreement, dispute, when you need to change direction or make a decision. So it's a broadly available process and framework that you can use. And what we need to think about, instead of WMD, weapons of mass destruction, is what would Maurice do? Here he is again. Here's Maurice. And we have to think about, what would Maurice do in this situation? If anybody wants to read the book later, you can find out, what Maurice's journey is about. And it's the mole of the mountain it's the shift from darkness and what you call tunnel vision. I can only see what's in front of me. I'm in a deep, dark tunnel. I live underground, to making the journey into the light. In other words, facing reality, making informed choices, and reaching what we call the mountaintop of experience. So let me give you another quick view of that map. Here it is, and we're going to just go through the map. There are 4 stages on the map. It's quite a busy map, but we're going to look at the storm. That's where there is a crisis or things are changing. There's a challenge. The place where we get stuck, or where your clients get stuck, the murky swamp of reality. Nobody wants to go there. It's where you have to face reality. It's where you have to dig deep. It's where you've got to understand that it's a bit murky. But only when you face that can you emerge. Then we have the bridge of courage, which is all about making decisions. And then the mountaintop of experience. And that's where you have a bigger view, a wider perspective of everything, and you can see much more clearly. There's some other characters on that map. And one of the most important is the Dragon of Doubt, I guess. So, but we'll go through parts of that. I can't go through all of that today. So the mediation process represents a compass. And let me see, does that come? Yes, I'm going to just... So when I'm working with clients and we're trying to make decisions about moving forward, we go through these 4 stages of the compass. We look at what's happening now, what's the problem or issue, how do we explore more deeply and understand the impact, how do we then look at solutions, options and criteria, and how do we walk forwards at the end. So I'm going to talk you through each stage of that, of the map, and with some illustrations from the book, which may be interesting for you. So this is the storm phase. This is where, so in the book, there is a great storm and it blows down an oak tree that had been the home under which Maurice the Mole had lived for, well, he'd lived, the oak tree had been there for 300 years and Maurice had lived there all his life. So what happens? And again, you know, this relates to your experience of something changing. You know, maybe things have been done in a particular way for forever, and now suddenly they're going to change and the tree is going to be blown over. And what the tree here represents, I call it the fallen oak, is that we can never go back to life as it was before. We have to keep marching, moving forward, adopting AI, complying with certain regulations. And so when there's a storm, when there's a crisis, when there's a challenge, or when there's a conflict, we have to stop and think, what is happening now? What is it? How do we narrate it? What is the story or narrative? And what are the negative outcomes that I fear, and for you, that your clients fear? And with narratives, is there more than one narrative? What's the narrative that I have? What's the story I'm telling myself or trying to tell my clients? And what is their narrative? What is their story? And what negative outcomes do they fear? And one of the most important things is to hear things from the other person's perspective and to acknowledge that and listen. So that's one of the keys of mediation, is being able to acknowledge and to listen to the other person's the other person's narrative and the other person's negative perceptions, so that you understand where they're coming from as well as where you're coming from. Then here's Maurice in the murky swamp of reality. So, you know, poor Maurice, he's lived all his life in a tunnel. He sets out on this journey. What happens is he sees the mountaintop glinting in the sunshine. He's never seen it before, only since the oak tree has blown down. He sees a wider landscape. He sees this mountain in the distance. He thinks, I want to go there. But no sooner has he started out than he finds he's fallen into this murky swamp. He's fallen into this bog full of mud and he's wading around and he needs to get out. And what happens if you fall into a bog? Well, the thing is, you scramble around as fast as possible and you just want to get out of there. You know, it's murky, smelly mud. But actually, what we all need to do when we're trying to accept reality is we need to explore more deeply. We need to understand what further evidence have we got. And again, you know, what's your experience versus what's somebody else's experience? So in a mediation, we're looking under the surface to say, what are people's beliefs? What are their needs? What are their interests? What are their hopes? What are their fears? What are their concerns? Rather than what are their positions? You know, who's right and who's wrong, or what does the regulation say? It's much more about what is my experience here? What's your experience? Where do we need to explore a little bit more deeply? And what further evidence do you need to gather? So that's the murky swamp of reality. Most of my clients, and I'm sure most of your clients, don't want to go there. It's not a very nice place, and they would far rather skip this stage of the process that I run. But it's not an option. You have to go through the murky swamp of reality. Next, we get to the bridge of courage. Now, this is all about solutions. What are the options? What are the possible solutions? And again, it's about thinking from both sides. What's your suggestion, but what are other people's suggestions? So again, being able to hear and to listen to what other people think. So again, moving away from that linear, there's one problem and one solution, to what possible solutions are there? What other suggestions can you make or can others make? And what do we need to settle or resolve this? So when I'm thinking about conflicts in particular, there's a difference between what I call settlement, just sort of resolving something because somebody's said that's it, you know, we'll do X, and resolution, which means everybody's happy to walk forward and we can draw a line under this and say, we're happy to leave the past behind us. So that may be helpful for any of you who are actually in a situation where there is a conflict going on and you need to draw a line under it. So we're coming towards the end now. On the map, you may have seen this little signpost, and this is about values and criteria or principles. How do we decide? One of the questions I've often asked when I've been the chair of a board, when I've been in board meetings, is on what criteria are we making this decision? What are the values that are important to us? And these are my 4 values that I find really important in my mediation work. It's very important to listen to others with the intention to learn, to show respect, courtesy and respect. That's what love means, and to laugh. So always bringing humor into the equation. And we're going to talk about the 3 hums when I close down. But listen, learn, love, and laugh are my particular values that I apply in mediation. But thinking very often, making a clear decision can depend on what your values and criteria are. And also exploring what are your clients' values and criteria, or what is your organizational values and criteria? How do they guide decision making? It's one of the things I find when I'm in board meetings is the challenge between making a decision based on what you think is right for you or you think is right yourself versus what is actually the right decision to make for the organization itself. And that can be quite an inner conflict that's going on between, particularly when you have some very strongly held personal values as well. And that can be something that needs to be teased out. How do we apply our organizational values to make the right decision for the organization going forward? That might be something helpful to think about. So the final stage on the map is Morris having made his decision, being able to walk forward and thinking once you've made a decision, once you've got over that bridge of courage, you've decided on what the options are and solutions, you've decided what your criteria are, how do you then walk forward? What is it you need to walk forward together in agreement, in collaboration, but also to think, what have you learned? What wisdom have you gained? And how do you now see the bigger picture? So I think, again, this may help you in your personal life. It may help you in your business relationships and maybe also with your clients in helping them to see what are they learning? How do they see the bigger picture? But this is very much about being able to see that bigger picture and also see that there are going to be other mountains to climb in the future as well. There's never only one mountain. So just quickly to think about, what are some questions that promote critical thinking? So we have to analyze assumptions. One of my business colleagues used to say in relation to our mediation work, we need to test all assumptions to extinction, because we make assumptions, judgments, and inferences about others and about situations. So what are the underlying assumptions? What are we assuming is right? Going back to the tooth fairy, assuming that just because there's a coin under the pillow, the tooth fairy exists. You know, let's test all those assumptions. Let's consider alternatives. What's another way of looking at this? What are alternative ways of seeing this particular situation? Then looking forwards, what are the consequences? What are some of the larger implications of this decision? What might this look like in a month's time, in a year's time, in 5 years' time? You know, where are we going with this? And then questioning sources. How do we know this is true? So it's always important to be thinking about things, question everything, test all assumptions to extinction, consider alternatives, and evaluate consequences. So just to finish up then, I have a saying which is only dead fish go with the flow. And that really means we have to question everything. We have to not just go with the flow. Certainly there are some things that are regulatory, that are mandatory, but being prepared to question things from our own perspective, making sure that we're clear where we should be going, where we should be speaking up, particularly in organizational contexts, in meetings with clients, and where we shouldn't just be going with the flow. So I believe that we live in a world that rewards speed, certainty and slogans. And certainly, you know, when you think about going in your motorboat or on your skis, that's the thing. We do like speed and we do like certainty. But mediation has taught me, I think, something radical, and that's that the most powerful thinkers are not the loudest, they are the most curious. That critical thinking is not about winning arguments, but it's about pausing, also pausing when others are rushing. It's about asking better questions. It's about choosing understanding over assumptions, and using the map to remind us where we want to go. So the compass reminds us how we move through the terrain. And we have to know that storms will come in the boardroom, in partnerships with your clients, and in particular in life. So the question isn't how we face complexity, it's about how will you meet it? Do you meet it with fear that we talked about, or do you meet it with curiosity? Do you meet it with certainty, or do you meet it with humility? And you meet it with reaction or with wisdom? So I have an invitation to you to finish with is that next time you feel triggered or a headline outrages you perhaps, or the next time a meeting moves too fast, maybe stop and ask one better question, listen one layer deeper, and choose curiosity over certainty. So remember, think deeply, differently, and dangerously. And I'd like to introduce you to the 3 hums. Bring the 3 hums with you. These are humor, to soften the certainty, humanity, to see the person behind the position, and humility, to accept that you might be wrong, because only dead fish go with the flow. So choose wisely. I usually forget to show my last slides, but here's a link to The Mole and the Mountain, which is a parable for our time. If anybody's interested, there's the link. And if you were interested in a signed copy, I'd be more than happy to sell you one myself. And then on LinkedIn, please do link with me. I tend to blog about 4 days a week, all sorts of things. Over the weekend, I made homemade pasta with my grandchildren, and then I wrote a blog called Hung Out to Dry. So it's all sorts of mixture between things I've been doing with my grandchildren and other things. And then I have a newsletter also. It's just out today. If anybody's interested in that, please do let me know. And there we go. And there's Maurice saying thank you. Thank you very much.
Jane, thank you so much. There was so much there. I loved all your, your examples, and I think there's so much there that we can take away as leaders. And even if we're sole practitioners, we're still leaders. We're leading our clients through.
Oh, absolutely. We're all leaders. We are all leaders. Yes.
We have leadership roles even with our families at times as well.
Yes.
So, incredible. Thank you. I've made loads of notes. And I have to say, when initially asked if you join us, it was really around the challenges of AI and all this kind of disruption. And I think it's so important we have that clear thinking in this times of change, because I suppose the only thing certain is that it's uncertain.
Yes.
But I think you've given us so much more than that today. So
fantastic.
Thank you ever so much. Lots of thank yous in the chat. A few hearts going up the screen. That must be
very nice.
But yes.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much, people. It's been great. Been great.
And do follow Jane. I was reading, you wrote an article about Peter Pan, didn't you, as an analogy?
Oh, I wrote an article. Yeah, it was my newsletter, I think, about Peter Pan. Yes. Yeah.
So, oh my gosh, Lots of love on the screen. Uh,
How nice.
So I think if anybody wants to find the book, there is we have the link. If not, please email in and we can share that.
I don't know if you send out an email, but I'll send you some links. I'll happy to send you a PDF of the slides and some links for you to email out if you want to.
I had some questions, but I don't think I want to dilute what you said. I think it's fantastic. So thank you ever so much. I think we will end on a high there.
Fantastic.
Right, we shall see you all on the next coffee morning in March. Sorry, I don't have the date. Mariska, do you know the date? It's the Wednesday, the 17th. It must be the 18th, actually, isn't it? Wednesday, the 18th of March. Same time, same place. So enjoy the rest of the month, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.